Yes, I'm ready to marry into a wealthy family. Bob smirked and said, "You can continue to struggle in your miserable life." I was taking a leisurely break in the hotel lobby when his patronizing remarks cut through my composure. Since his new wife was a president's daughter, I wondered where he had met her. Bob, sounding smug and petulant, boasted, "Julie is the daughter of Johnson Enterprises." I noticed the name as soon as he uttered it. Which business? It dawned on me. Yes, the one. Bob smiled proudly as a chuckle erupted within of me that I was unable to control. "I'm Amy, 35 years old, and I live with my spouse, Bob. I work primarily in administration for my family's real estate company. The important business strategies are overseen by my father, the president. I'm supposed to take over the business eventually because I'm the only child. I feel pressure from the firm's older leaders to become president one day. I have taken care, though, to avoid talking to Bob too much about our family business. He is 3 years my senior and recently graduated from high school. He works for a moving firm. I didn't want him to think less of himself. Of course, moving is a tough job that requires physical strength and skill to swiftly transport heavy items. A job for professionals. I don't mind his lack of a college degree, but I understand his feelings. So I avoid mentioning my prestigious university education or my future role as president in our daily conversations. Bob and I met through a friend in college. My friend hired his moving company, and he was in charge of her move. Initially interested in my friend, Bob was turned down because she was already in a relationship. However, they got along well, so she introduced him to me, and I was looking for a partner at the time. Our unusual meeting turned out well. Bob's carefree nature matched my meticulous personality. After several dates, we became a couple in my late 20s, and our relationship quickly led to marriage within a year. Thus began my life as Bob's wife. Our married life started without any issues. Bob's parents were incredibly kind, always welcoming me with smiles during our visits. Considering the common mother-in-law issues among my friends, I felt lucky to have such a harmonious relationship with my in-laws. However, Bob's job was demanding, often keeping him out late and leaving him physically exhausted. Despite his fatigue, he never neglected our marital life. I often thought he didn't need to try so hard. "Thanks for always waiting up for me," Bob would say, thanking me for simply preparing dinner after his long work days. I felt blessed to have such a wonderful husband, but our peaceful days began to shift a year into our marriage. "Hey, why can't we have kids?" One night, as we settled into bed, Bob casually brought up the subject, his tone slightly irritated. I was taken by surprise. I had thought about having children too, but we weren't actively trying. Given our regular marital life, I believed it would happen in time. It's just bad timing. We've only been married a year, so it's not something to worry about yet. I definitely wanted children, but I knew rushing wouldn't help. To reassure Bob, I adopted a relaxed tone and said, "It's still okay." "Huh? Don't you know that for couples not using contraception, there's about an 80% chance of conceiving within a year?" Bob quoted statistics more forcefully than usual. Not well versed in pregnancy data, I found that number incredibly high. "Really? If you're that eager for kids, should we get tested together?" I suggested, thinking it best to identify and address any potential issues. But Bob's response was unexpected. "What are you talking about? Are you implying it's my fault? Infertility issues are usually the woman's fault. There's no point in me getting tested." His contemptuous tone stunned me. I couldn't believe my ears. I hadn't accused him of being the cause. I simply suggested testing since we didn't know where the issue lay yet. But Bob jumped to the conclusion that I was blaming him. It's definitely the woman's fault, he added, implying that I was the problem. I wanted to say more, but I was shaking, barely able to reply. Of course, so just you get tested. I'm too busy with work. I have a job too, I shot back, feeling frustrated. You're just a placeholder office lady, right? Just coasting along in a company thanks to your dad's connections. I had enough. I never just coast at my company. Sure, I do a lot of administrative work now, but I'm also learning management skills from my father for when I take over. I'm constantly trying to prove myself, and it's tough dealing with the higher-ups. Bob just didn't understand my struggles. That night, it seemed pointless to argue. Every word I said was met with sharp retorts. We went to sleep back to back, surrounded by a heavy atmosphere. From that day, Bob's attitude towards me changed completely. I'm home. What? Dinner's not ready yet? What time do you think it is? Can't have kids. Can't do housework. What a useless wife. One evening after a late talk with my father about the future, I came home to find Bob berating me for not having dinner ready. I'm sorry. I just got home 10 minutes ago. I'll start cooking now. Just wait a little, please. I hurried to explain. Typical of a small company's boss's daughter, he muttered. He didn't know that my father's real estate company was not small at all, with hundreds of employees. But I knew arguing this point was meaningless. I'll cook right away, have a drink, and wait. Bob loved his alcohol. It seemed to calm him down. Relying on alcohol to maintain our relationship felt sad. I hated being berated by him, but if alcohol could soothe him even a bit, then it was worth it. The next morning, Bob's mood hadn't improved. Make sure dinner's ready when I get home, he spat as he left. I sighed, thinking about my plans for the day. I had taken the day off to visit the gynecologist for fertility testing, as previously mentioned by Bob. Although I was the one who initially suggested the testing, the fact that only I was undergoing it while Bob refused was hard to accept. But complaining wouldn't change anything if the issue was with me. I needed to start infertility treatment promptly. Bob had been wanting kids, and I too hoped for a child soon. I knew fertility rates differ between the 20s and 30s, so sooner was better for treatment. The clinic was busier than expected, and I was called in for examination an hour after registration. After undergoing a physical examination and blood tests, I was told that the results would be available during my next visit. It would be a shock if the issue was with me, but I was prepared for any necessary steps, no matter the outcome. I resolved not to lose heart. Bob, I went for the fertility test today. When Bob came home from work, I informed him about the test. Figures. If the problem's with you, testing's the right thing to do. Let me know the results as soon as you get them. Yes, I will. Bob's belief that I was the cause of our infertility frustrated me. The fertility testing required much time and effort. A bit of understanding from him would have been welcome. 5 years passed, and I turned 35. Though we continued our efforts to conceive, we remained childless, and Bob seemed to have given up on having a child with me. His late nights increased, and sometimes he didn't come home at all. When asked, he said he was out drinking with colleagues, then singing karaoke till morning. His behavior, more akin to a college student, deeply exasperated me. My work had become busier, and the thought of starting a family was pushed aside. But Bob's recent actions were too much. His lack of concern for our home life was clear. One day, after Bob went out on his day off, I noticed he'd left his smartphone in the living room. He forgot to take it with him. With that thought, I picked up Bob's phone to take it to his room. It was then that his phone rang, an incoming call. The caller ID showed the name Julie. Assuming it was a work contact, I answered to inform them that Bob had forgotten his phone at home. "Hey Bob, you're late. I've been waiting for 30 minutes. Where are you? If you don't hurry, we'll miss the park opening." The flirty voice on the phone made me catch my breath. "Hello? Can you hear me? Hurry up, okay? We haven't had a date in so long." The word date shook me, and I quickly ended the call. My heart wouldn't stop racing. Who was this woman? She mentioned a date, so she likely wasn't a colleague. He's cheating on me, holding undeniable proof of Bob's infidelity. I clenched his phone tightly. Julie had said it was a long-awaited date, indicating a long-term affair. I trembled with indescribable anger. While I was struggling with infertility, Bob was carelessly cheating on me. His recent distance now made sense. He no longer needed me. Unforgivable. Determined to make Bob pay, I started collecting evidence of his infidelity. It wasn't hard to gather proof. First, I easily unlocked his smartphone using his birth date. The call history was filled with Julie's name. When I opened the messaging app, I found numerous messages between Bob and Julie, filled with embarrassingly affectionate words that made me feel nauseated. I took photos of this evidence with my phone. After placing Bob's phone back in his room, I spent the day as if nothing happened. After a month of a strange marriage, my father, the company president, summoned me to his office. "I have something important to discuss with you," he said gravely. Shocked by his words, I couldn't believe what I heard. "Is that true?" "Yes, so I'm counting on you." Disturbed, I returned to my office, barely concentrating on work. That evening, Bob suggested we separate. Having found evidence of his affair, I had been contemplating when to bring up divorce, but him initiating it saved me the hassle. "Yes, let's divorce." "Really?" Because I had readily accepted the divorce, Bob seemed surprised. Perhaps he was happy about being able to be with his mistress, a woman named Julie. His face was filled with unmistakable joy that I found irritating. Despite my irritation with Bob's expression, I signed the divorce papers he offered. "I can file these tomorrow. I'll be leaving this house." "Okay. Are you sure about the mortgage?" I anticipated he would want me to leave, so I casually asked. "Oh yes, I'm fine." Bob's job was demanding but not high-paying. I doubted he could handle the mortgage alone. But since he initiated the divorce and was the one cheating, I felt no obligation to help. I packed and left the house. 3 days later, I moved back to my parents' house nearby. My parents initially seemed concerned when I told them about my divorce, but when I explained that Bob had cheated on me, they became furious. They repeatedly reassured me that it was the right decision to part ways with such a man. I threw myself into work, trying to forget about Bob. Before I realized it, a year had flown by. I was so engrossed in my work that I lost sight of everything else. It was astonishing. One day, while relaxing in the living room, my dad approached me. "Why don't you take a break and go on a trip? It's going to get busy starting next month." I guess he thought I'd been working too hard and needed a distraction. Indeed, I had been overwhelmed with various things lately and felt mentally exhausted. Thinking a little trip wouldn't hurt, I took up Dad's suggestion and decided to travel to the Northeast. It was my first solo trip, and I was both nervous and excited. The air in the Northeast was crisp and seemed to cleanse my weary soul. Interacting with the locals who helped me navigate and chatting with the owner of a bar, I found everyone to be incredibly kind, which gradually healed my spirit. I had booked a hotel in Seattle, the most famous and largest around here, thinking why not enjoy the trip to the fullest. After checking in, I relaxed in the lobby with a welcome drink. The fatigue from the journey seemed to melt away, feeling utterly comfortable. As I jokingly considered moving to Seattle, a familiar voice called out, "Huh? Hey, what are you doing here?" I turned around, startled by the unmistakable voice of my ex-husband, Bob, who was entering the lobby with 2 large suitcases and a young woman. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with flawless skin, bold makeup, and striking red nails. Despite the chilly northeast weather, she was wearing a short skirt with bare legs. Startled, I stared at Ba and the woman. "Why are you here? And who is she?" I blurted it out, even though I didn't really want to know. Oh, let me introduce you. This is Julie, my new wife. We're on our honeymoon. Guess what? She's a wealthy businessman's daughter." Bob, who had changed so much from before our divorce, seemed genuinely happy, even volunteering information I hadn't asked for. But Julie, that was the name of the person on the phone, disgusted that he was with such a young girl, I felt a surge of discomfort. "You're on a solo trip here?" "That's pathetic," Bob sneered. Despite being the one who cheated and initiated our divorce, Julie too was looking at me, her eyes narrowed with amusement. "Hey, Bob, is this your ex-wife? She looks old. Hurry up with the check-in." Julie's catty tone irritated me. I glared at her as Bob nonchalantly wrapped an arm around her waist and responded, "Yeah, I'm set for life marrying into money. You can keep struggling in your poor life." Bob smirked condescendingly. His high-pitched voice echoed through the hotel lobby, disrupting the elegant atmosphere I was enjoying and leaving me feeling upset. But his mention of marrying a businessman's daughter made me wonder where he had met someone like that. "Yeah, Julie is the daughter of Johnson Enterprises." Bob's middle-aged laugh seemed childishly proud to me. "Johnson Enterprises?" I pondered, feeling it sounded familiar. "Oh, right, that company." After a moment, I recalled what Johnson Enterprises was. Bob's face lit up with pride. "Impressive, huh?" he exclaimed, but I was secretly holding back laughter inside. "Come on, you know this company. Her family's loaded, and they even paid off the mortgage on that house. Quickly. Thanks for divorcing me so easily, Amy." His tone was dripping with sarcasm, but it didn't bother me at all. "Yeah, I know them. They're in the biggest building in downtown, right? I've seen it and even been there," I replied calmly. "Oh, you've been there?" Bob seemed surprised. "It's quick then. Her family owns a huge company, so they're loaded. Breaking up with you was the right choice." Bob smirked nastily, but I simply nodded, still calm. "That building is part of our real estate holdings," I mentioned casually as if I just remembered. Bob and Julie both asked in unison, "What do you mean by our real estate?" "That building is rented by my father for his most prestigious office. I don't know if your company is involved in real estate, but it's not a shabby building." Both seemed skeptical of my words. I hesitated for a moment, but there was no turning back now in telling Bob about my company. We were divorced, and his pride was no longer my concern. "Yes, I know how grand it is. I was there when my father bought that building. It was about $200 million, I think. But recently, Dad was complaining about a tenant not paying their rent. Turns out it was your company. In fact, my father is a real estate magnate with assets worth $3.2 billion. The building Johnson Enterprises is in is one of them. The tenants of the building change regularly, But currently, it's Johnson Enterprises. For the past few months, they hadn't paid their rent, and that's what was troubling my father. Rent not paid. Julie looked shocked, but then she burst out laughing. That can't be true. Our company's doing great. We can surely pay the rent. I'm not falling for such a lame lie to drive a wedge between Bob and me. Her shrill voice echoed in my ears. I let out a deep sigh. It seemed like a reasonable conversation with this woman was impossible. Pulling out my smartphone right there, I decided to call my dad. Dad, I'm here with the daughter of John Onson Enterprises. Can you send me a photo of the reminder notice for the rent? I quickly relayed my request, and Dad sent a photo of the rent reminder notice for Johnson Enterprises. Showing it to Bob and Julie, I doubted they could suspect it was a fake given the speed. See? You can tell, right? 3 months of unpaid rent. If you don't pay soon, we might have to sue. What are you going to do? At the mention of a lawsuit, Bob and Julie's faces turned pale. Come to think of it, Dad has been really on edge lately, yelling about sales and firing a lot of employees. Julie mumbled, sounding unsure. Seeing her, Bob shouted in despair. Lies. You're just trying to trick us and tear Julie and me apart, aren't you? You're still that kind of person trying to get back at me for remarrying. Your tactics are dirty. Startled by Bob's loud voice, I took a step back. Dirty tactics, huh? I recalled all the heartless words Bob had hurled at me during our marriage. Determined to confront Bob, who was now gloating about marrying Julie, a wealthy businessman's daughter, I readied myself to tell him the truth. What are you even saying? Do you really think I still have feelings for you? How foolish. I've long been fed up with a man like you. In fact, I've been feeling sorry for Julie, who got caught up with you. Did you marry her just for her money? You married me for shallow reasons too, like wanting to get married quickly or wanting kids. And who was it that left me when he found out we couldn't have kids? Who insulted me, calling me useless for being infertile? You're to blame for all of it, yet you think I still like you? You must be out of your mind. I felt a wave of relief as I unleashed my pent-up frustrations on Bob. He trembled with anger. You're just an arrogant old hag. You probably can't even get married or have kids anymore. Julie and I were planning to have fun making a baby after this trip, and now you're accusing Johnson Enterprises of not paying rent. Panicked upon realizing the poor performance of Johnson Enterprises, Bob was desperate to blame all his misfortunes on me. I decided to deliver the final blow to Bob. Oh, I didn't mention it, but I'm 4 months pregnant. I'm in the stable days of my pregnancy, so Dad suggested I take this trip to relax. Of course, I have my doctor's permission. After divorcing Bob, I found a new love. My boss at work and a subordinate of my father. He supported me mentally and encouraged me, fully supporting me at work and advocating for me to become the next CEO. I found out I was pregnant with his child just 3 months ago, and knowing about the baby, we quickly got married. The company celebrated our marriage grandly, and my pregnancy was going smoothly. Encouraged by my father and husband, I embarked on this trip. Just before breaking up with Bob, my father had told me he was retiring as CEO next month due to his diabetes diagnosis and thought it was time to step down. Therefore, I would inherit my father's assets, making it easier for me to accept the divorce from Bob. Even without Bob, I knew I could live a full life. The word pregnant slipped effortlessly from my lips, leaving Bob shouting, "What? You're pregnant? So were you using birth control when we were married? What's going on? Bob stomped his feet in complete confusion. Birth control? I never did that. Remember? I told you I had infertility tests at the clinic, and they found no issues. So the problem was with you. Too bad. I bluntly told Bob, and his face twisted visibly. The problem was with me? Does that mean Julie and I can't have kids? Why did I divorce you and marry Julie? Bob muttered to himself, shoulders slumped in defeat. What do you mean? Why? I feel betrayed knowing you're infertile. Julie snapped, angry at Bob's selfish reasoning. Realizing I couldn't bother with them anymore, I said my final words. That's why, from now on, please don't involve yourself with me and Julie regarding the rent for Johnson Enterprises. I won't back down until it's fully paid. If you plan to continue renting that building, please pay the overdue rent soon. Otherwise, we'll have to take legal action. I have nothing more to say to you two, so goodbye. I left Bob and Julie arguing and confidently walked back to my hotel room. After returning from my trip, my husband greeted me with a smile, saying, "Welcome back. Sorry, I couldn't help around the house. Was everything okay?" "Of course it was fine. I'm glad you got to relax, Amy." "Thank you." My husband smiled warmly at me, and I felt a great sense of relief. Since marrying my current husband, I've been reassured every day, completely forgetting about Bob. Since that trip, I haven't met Bob. The following is what I heard through my father's contacts after that incident. Bob and Julie's fights became incessant. Despite thinking he was marrying a wealthy heiress, Bob discovered Johnson Enterprises was in deep debt. Coincidentally, news was all over TV about a Johnson Enterprises employee embezzling millions of dollars from clients. Julie's father knew about the fraud, but tried to cover it up for the company's reputation. However, once the scandal became public, Johnson Enterprises' stock plummeted. Having lost its credibility, the company saw a mass exodus of employees. In such a state, they couldn't possibly pay the rent, so my father was taking legal action against Johnson Enterprises. The future of the company looked bleak, as it was entirely Johnson Enterprises' fault. Bob, having lost a fortune he thought was within his grasp, was furiously blaming everyone but himself, thinking he could ride on the coattails of a wealthy heiress. Julie, realizing Bob was infertile, accused him of marriage fraud. Furthermore, after our hotel encounter, I had a lawyer demand compensation from Bob for his infidelity, leaving both him and Julie in debt. I heard that Bob and Julie ended up arguing every time they saw each other, and they finally got divorced recently. Then, unbelievably, Bob called me after divorcing Julie. "Amy, please marry me again. I have debts. Other than the alimony, Julie made me buy everything she wanted and then left without paying a dime. You're the only one I can rely on. I'll do anything for you. Please forgive me." Bob begged like a pauper, and his cries were so pathetic I felt like throwing up. It was disgusting how his unwavering mindset of marrying for money persisted. "No, I don't want to interact with you in any way again. Please don't get in touch with me again. I'm going to be happy with my spouse and our child." I gently said him farewell and blocked his phone number right away. That should put an end to Bob's crazy calls going forward. Bob's life will probably be lonely now that he has lost both his wife and his money. It might be hard for him to get married again because of his infertility. Furthermore, it's difficult to see someone falling for someone who makes fun of other people as frequently as Bob does. I could only conclude that he ought to make an effort to pay back his obligations. I considered it as though it belonged to someone else. For my part, I'm excited about my future with my spouse and our impending child. I'm enjoying this unmatched happiness and finding both my personal and professional lives to be more rewarding than before.